The gym fell silent when the CEO's son threw the first punch. The single father barely moved, and the young black belt mistook that stillness for fear. He laughed, stepped closer, and demanded that the man fight back. Nobody in the room knew that the quiet father had spent years commanding rescue missions where one wrong decision could cost innocent lives. Nobody knew that he had once led a Navy SEAL rescue team through situations far more dangerous than a padded training mat. And nobody knew that the man standing in worn sneakers had come to the gym for one reason only, to teach his young daughter that courage didn't mean hurting people. But when the black belt crossed a line, the retired commander finally lifted his hands. What happened next changed the arrogant fighter forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that true strength means protecting people instead of humiliating them, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, leave a comment, and subscribe to Dad's Soul Diaries. Sometimes the person who looks the weakest is carrying a history of courage that nobody can see. The single father was named Merrick Vale, a 41-year-old widower who lived in a quiet neighborhood with his 11-year-old daughter, Nessa. Merrick owned a small mobile appliance repair business. Every morning, he loaded tools into an old white van and drove across the city repairing washing machines, refrigerators, and broken ovens. His hands were rough, his clothes were usually stained with grease, and his van had more dents than paint. But Nessa didn't care about any of that. To her, her father was the safest person in the world. Merrick had been raising her alone since her mother passed away 3 years earlier. The loss had changed both of them. Nessa had become quieter, and Merrick had become even more protective. He had learned how to make breakfast, braid his daughter's hair badly enough to make her laugh, attend school meetings, repair broken toys, and somehow work enough hours to keep the bills paid. But there was one thing Nessa had been asking him to do for months. She wanted to learn self-defense. After a frightening incident at school, Nessa had become nervous around older children. Merrick didn't want her growing up afraid, so he enrolled her in a respected martial arts academy owned by one of the city's wealthiest businessmen, Wren. Cashin was a powerful technology CEO whose company occupied several floors of a downtown tower. He had built his fortune from nothing and was known for his intense personality. His only son, Rhett Wren, was 26 and already a highly decorated black belt. Rhett had grown up surrounded by expensive coaches, private trainers, and competitions. He was talented, disciplined, and physically gifted. But he had inherited something else from his father. Pride. Rhett believed winning made him important. He believed losing was embarrassing. And most of all, he believed people with no fighting experience had no place challenging him. The academy was bright and modern, with polished wooden floors, large windows, and trophies displayed behind glass. Nessa began attending beginner classes twice a week. Merrick always waited outside until the class ended. He usually sat quietly with a paperback book while checking his repair schedule on his phone. Rhett noticed him. At first, he ignored him. Then he began making jokes about the old van. Eventually, he started wondering why Merrick never seemed impressed by him. One afternoon, after a training session, Rhett walked toward Merrick while several students were packing their bags. He asked whether Merrick had ever trained in martial arts. Merrick said no. Rhett smiled and asked whether he was afraid of fighting. Merrick calmly said that he had simply come to pick up his daughter. That answer irritated Rhett. He stepped closer and told Merrick that every man should know how to defend himself. Merrick said he agreed. Rhett asked him to spar. Merrick refused. He explained that he didn't want trouble. Rhett laughed. He told the other students that apparently some men were too frightened to step onto the mat. Merrick ignored him. Nessa watched from the doorway. She could see the tension. Her father simply placed a hand on her shoulder and told her they were leaving. The next week, Rhett tried again. This time, Wren was present. Cashin had arrived to watch his son train before an upcoming tournament. He saw Rhett approach Merrick and initially assumed it was harmless. Rhett challenged Merrick again. Merrick politely refused. Cashin watched silently. Then Rhett stepped onto the mat and told Merrick that if he was going to bring his daughter into a martial arts academy, he should at least have the courage to learn something himself. Merrick looked toward Nessa. She was nervous. He didn't want her seeing him being humiliated. So he stepped onto the mat. The room immediately became quiet. Merrick removed his jacket. Underneath was a plain gray shirt. He looked ordinary. Rhett looked enormous beside him. Rhett smiled and told Merrick that he would take it easy. Merrick nodded. The first exchange began. Rhett moved quickly. Merrick stepped backward. Rhett threw a controlled punch. Merrick avoided it. Another. Merrick moved again. Rhett began laughing. He told Merrick that running wasn't sparring. Merrick said nothing. Rhett attacked more aggressively. Merrick continued avoiding every strike. Something strange happened. The more Rhett attacked, the calmer Merrick became. His breathing never changed. His eyes stayed focused. His feet moved only when necessary. Cashin noticed. He stopped smiling. There was something familiar about Merrick's movement. Not martial arts. Something else. Precision. Rhett suddenly rushed forward and tried to grab Merrick. Merrick shifted his weight and redirected him. Rhett stumbled. The room became silent. Rhett's face reddened. He attacked again. Merrick moved aside. Rhett lost balance. Again. This time, Merrick caught his arm before he fell. He could have taken him down. Instead, he helped him regain his footing. Rhett became furious. He asked why Merrick wasn't fighting. Merrick quietly told him that he wasn't interested in hurting him. That sentence made Rhett angrier than any punch could have. He charged. Merrick finally moved. One step. One turn. One controlled movement. Rhett found himself kneeling on the mat with his arms safely controlled. The entire room froze. Merrick released him immediately. He stepped backward. No celebration. No smile. No humiliation. Rhett stared at him. He asked where Merrick had learned that. Merrick didn't answer. Cashin stepped closer. He asked Merrick whether he had served in the military. Merrick looked at him. Then he nodded. Cashin asked what branch. Merrick said the Navy. Cashin looked at his son. Then back at Merrick. He asked whether he had been a SEAL. Merrick hesitated. He finally admitted that he had. But that wasn't all. Merrick had once led a Navy SEAL rescue team. His unit had specialized in recovering people from impossible situations, civilians trapped in hostile areas, sailors stranded after disasters, and crews caught in dangerous waters. He had spent years making decisions under pressure. Then one mission changed everything. During a nighttime rescue, one of Merrick's closest teammates had been killed. Merrick had carried the man's belongings home. He had attended the funeral. And afterward, he had realized that he didn't want to spend the rest of his life surrounded by violence. When Nessa was born, that decision became permanent. He left the service. He became a father. And he never looked back. Rhett sat quietly on the mat. For the first time, he understood that Merrick hadn't refused to spar because he was afraid. He had refused because he knew exactly what fighting could cost. Cashin asked Merrick why he had never mentioned his military background. Merrick said he didn't want his daughter growing up believing her father was a hero. He wanted her to believe that ordinary kindness could be heroic too. Those words affected everyone. Especially Rhett. He had spent years chasing medals and trophies. Merrick had spent years trying to forget his. After the class ended, Rhett approached Nessa. He apologized for embarrassing her father. Nessa looked at him carefully. She accepted his apology. But she told him something he would never forget. She said her father wasn't afraid of him. He simply didn't need to prove anything. Rhett looked toward Merrick. That sentence stayed in his mind all night. The following week, Rhett changed. At first, the students didn't notice. Then they began seeing him help beginners instead of mocking them. He stopped laughing when someone made a mistake. He began encouraging younger students. When another fighter challenged him, he didn't respond with arrogance. Cashin noticed the difference. He asked his son what had changed. Rhett said he had finally met someone stronger than him. Cashin asked who. Rhett said Merrick. Cashin smiled and told him that Merrick hadn't defeated him. He had simply shown him the difference between strength and ego. Meanwhile, Merrick continued working. His repair business was struggling. He had fallen behind on several payments. His van needed expensive repairs. Nessa's school fees were increasing. And Merrick had begun considering whether he needed to take a second job. One rainy evening, his van broke down on the side of the road. He sat behind the steering wheel, exhausted. Nessa was waiting at home. He looked at the dashboard and closed his eyes. For a few seconds, the old memories returned. Missions. Loss. Responsibility. The feeling of being unable to save everyone. He shook his head and started the engine again. The van didn't move. The next morning, Merrick found something.